Oh, everything all right?
Yes, everything's all right.
What do you want, martyrdom?
I want to die as I've lived.
What have you got there? Is this your special book? It's got to be burnt with the others, and you're under arrest.
What are you doing, Linda?
I find these things in the house.
The screen fills with vibrant orange flames as a fire hose sprays not water, but kerosene. Books flutter and burn, their pages curling into ash. This is the world of Fahrenheit 451, where firemen don't extinguish fires. They start them.
I said the books, Montag!
Released in 1966, Francois Truffaut's adaptation of Ray Bradbury's dystopian novel arrived during a turbulent era. The Cold War was intensifying, the counterculture movement was gaining momentum, and fears of government control and censorship loomed large in the public consciousness. This cultural backdrop provided the perfect canvas for Bradbury's cautionary tale about a society that burns books to control thought. What many viewers don't realize is that Fahrenheit 451 marked several significant firsts for its acclaimed director. This was Truffaut's first and only English-language film, as well as his first venture into color cinematography. Working with a modest budget of approximately $1.5 million, the film performed adequately at the box office, but never achieved blockbuster status.
Where are the books?
If you didn't know that, you wouldn't be here.
Upstairs.
Its true value would emerge over decades as its warnings grew increasingly prescient. At its core, Fahrenheit 451 isn't merely a film about censorship. It's a visual meditation on the relationship between knowledge and power, conformity and independence, screens and reality. While Bradbury's novel provided the framework, Truffaut transformed the literary warning into something uniquely cinematic, a quietly disturbing portrait of a society choosing comfortable numbness over the painful complexities of free thought. As we explore this landmark film, we'll examine how its visual language, performances, and thematic concerns continue to resonate nearly 6 decades after its release. In a world now dominated by screens and algorithmically filtered information, Fahrenheit 451 feels less like science fiction and more like an eerie premonition of our digital present. Among Fahrenheit 451's most haunting sequences is the book-burning raid, where Montag and his fellow firemen storm an old woman's home filled with hidden literature.
Hey, you two, in there!
Rather than abandon her books, she chooses to burn alongside them, striking a match and becoming a martyr for knowledge. The camera lingers on her resolute face as flames begin to engulf her home, a powerful visualization of the film's central conflict between conformity and intellectual freedom. Equally memorable is the sterile bedroom scene between Montag and his wife Linda, as she mindlessly interacts with the family on her wall-sized television screens, completely disconnected from her husband and reality. This sequence brilliantly foreshadows our modern relationship with screens and entertainment. Francois Truffaut brought a distinctive visual approach to this dystopian world through his collaboration with cinematographer Nicolas Roeg. Together, they crafted a controlled color palette where red represents the destructive power of fire and censorship, while cool blues and sterile whites dominate the conformist society. This deliberate visual strategy creates a world that feels simultaneously familiar and alienating. The film also stands as a masterclass in visual storytelling through architecture and space. Truffaut utilized London's modernist Alton estate as the primary location, transforming its concrete structures into the perfect embodiment of the story's dehumanized society. The uniform buildings, with their rigid lines and lack of individuality, become characters themselves, visual metaphors for the standardization of thought. Behind the scenes, the production faced unique challenges. Truffaut's limited English created communication barriers with his predominantly British crew. Oscar Werner and the director frequently clashed over character interpretation, with their relationship deteriorating as filming progressed. These tensions contributed to Truffaut later describing Fahrenheit 451 as his most difficult filmmaking experience. The film's sound design deserves special attention for its subtle reinforcement of themes. Notice how dialogue in the conformist society is delivered in flat, effectless tones, while conversations about books bring emotional modulation to characters' voices. This audio contrast underscores how literature awakens feeling in a numbed world. The electronic score by Bernard Herrmann, his only collaboration with Truffaut, eschews traditional melodic development for dissonant mechanical motifs that reflect the society's technological sterility. Truffaut employs several ingenious visual techniques to emphasize the sensory experience of reading in a world where it's forbidden. When Montag first opens a book in private, the camera adopts his perspective, moving across lines of text with the tentative excitement of someone rediscovering a lost pleasure. Later, as his addiction to reading grows, these sequences become more fluid and confident. The director understood that in depicting a world without books, he needed to remind viewers of reading's unique tactile and visual pleasures. Perhaps the film's most impressive technical achievement is how it handles the books themselves. In a story where literature is central, Truffaut made the inspired choice to eliminate opening credits, instead narrating them verbally, immediately immersing viewers in a world where the written word has been supplanted by oral communication. The physical books are filmed with unusual reverence, treated like characters rather than props, with lingering close-ups that invite viewers to connect with these forbidden objects. The book-burning sequences utilized innovative practical effects for their time, combining actual burning of specially prepared book copies with careful camera work that emphasized the destruction of knowledge rather than glorifying the spectacle of flames. This thoughtful approach to depicting censorship avoids the very sensationalism the film critiques. The emotional core of Fahrenheit 451 rests on the performances of its small but powerful cast, particularly Oscar Werner as Guy Montag. Werner brings a fascinating complexity to this character's transformation from dedicated book burner to literary rebel. His performance is a study in subtle evolution, beginning with rigid posture and mechanical movements that gradually soften as Montag rediscovers his humanity through literature. Werner's expressive eyes convey his internal conflict even when his face remains stoic, particularly in the raid sequences where we witness his growing discomfort with destruction. Julie Christie takes on the challenging dual role of Linda, Montag's screen-addicted wife, and Clarice, the free-thinking teacher who awakens his conscience. As Linda, Christie perfectly captures the vacant contentment of someone whose mind has been dulled by endless entertainment and sedatives. Her interactions with the interactive television family feel eerily prophetic of modern social media relationships. Then, as Clarice, Christie transforms completely, animated, curious, and alive in ways that make her influence on Montag entirely believable. This casting decision brilliantly reinforces the film's theme of choice between mindless conformity and intellectual vitality. The casting of Christie in these dual roles wasn't merely a practical production decision, but a deliberate thematic choice by Truffaut. By having the same actress embody both Montag's reality and his possibility, the film visually suggests that society's members contain within themselves the capacity for both mindless consumption and intellectual awakening. This visual doubling creates a powerful subtext that the conformity problem isn't just external censorship, but internal choice. We all contain both Linda and Clarice within us. B. Duffel delivers an unforgettable performance as the book woman, despite her brief screen time. Her quiet defiance as she chooses immolation over surrendering her library provides the emotional catalyst for Montag's final conversion. Her line, "I want to die as I've lived,"
I want to die as I've lived.
resonates throughout the remainder of the film, establishing the moral stakes of intellectual freedom. Duffel's performance embodies the film's central question: what values are worth sacrifice? Cyril Cusack delivers a chilling performance as Captain Beatty, Montag's superior officer. What makes Cusack's portrayal so effective is his reasonable, almost paternal approach to censorship. Rather than portraying Beatty as a simple villain, Cusack gives him the conviction of someone who genuinely believes that burning books protect society. The scene where he calmly explains how literary controversies led to systematic censorship stands as one of the film's most disturbing moments, precisely because his logic almost seems reasonable. The subtle power dynamics between Werner and Cusack create some of the film's most tension-filled moments. Their verbal sparring sessions, particularly when Beatty suspects Montag's conversion, showcase a masterclass in restrained acting. Watch closely how their physical positioning shifts throughout the film, initially with Beatty dominant in the frame, gradually equalizing as Montag finds his courage, culminating in their final fatal confrontation, where Montag literally turns the weapons of censorship against their wielder. The narrative reaches its emotional peak during two pivotal sequences that have lost none of their power. First is Montag's forbidden reading of David Copperfield to his wife's friends, where Werner perfectly captures both the character's nervousness and growing confidence as the words affect the unexpectedly emotional women. The second comes in the film's final act, as Montag discovers the book people in the forest, individuals who have each memorized a book to preserve it for future generations. This haunting sequence transforms the abstract concept of literary preservation into something deeply human, as we watch these walking libraries recite their texts, determined that knowledge will survive despite society's attempt to erase it. What makes these performances particularly impressive is how they work within Truffaut's restrained directorial approach. Unlike many dystopian films that rely on elaborate world building, Fahrenheit 451 creates its impact through the actors' subtle reactions to their sterile environment. The emotion emerges not from dramatic speeches or explosive confrontations, but from quiet moments of realization, a perfect marriage of performance style and thematic content. When Fahrenheit 451 premiered in 1966, it received a distinctly mixed reception that would transform dramatically over subsequent decades. Critics acknowledged Truffaut's visual craftsmanship, but found the pacing deliberate to the point of sluggishness. The New York Times called it cold and intellectual, while others praised its ideas but questioned its emotional impact. This initial response reflected the challenge of adapting Bradbury's fiery prose into Truffaut's more contemplative visual language. What particularly divided audiences was the film's relationship to its source material. Bradbury himself expressed disappointment with certain changes, particularly the omission of his mechanical hound and the altered portrayal of Clarice. The film softens some of the novel's harsher elements while amplifying the emphasis on media control rather than literary censorship. These creative decisions initially distanced some viewers familiar with the book, but have proven surprisingly prescient in our modern context. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Fahrenheit 451's evolution is how technological developments have transformed its reception. When viewed in the 1960s, the wall-sized interactive screens seemed like far-fetched science fiction. Today, they appear remarkably similar to smart TVs, video calls, and immersive social media. The wife's seashell earpieces that provide constant audio stimulation eerily prefigured modern wireless earbuds. What once seemed like artistic exaggeration now feels uncomfortably familiar. The film contains several fascinating details that reveal more about Truffaut's vision with each viewing. For instance, the director made the deliberate choice to exclude printed words from the film's universe entirely. There are no newspapers, street signs, or even opening credits. This visual strategy immerses viewers in a world where reading has been systematically eliminated. Another subtle touch is how books in the film are disguised as other objects or hidden in plain sight, mirroring how forbidden knowledge often survives in repressive societies. Another hidden layer emerges in understanding the production context. Truffaut, a director deeply influenced by books and literacy, struggled with the English language throughout filming. This communication barrier created an environment where he himself experienced the frustration of limited expression, a meta-commentary on the film's themes. The resulting tension between Truffaut and his cast, particularly Oscar Werner, added an unintended dimension to the story's exploration of freedom and control. Over time, critical assessment has shifted dramatically in the film's favor. What was once viewed as too cold is now appreciated as deliberately detached, a stylistic choice that reflects the emotional numbness of the society it depicts. The film's warning about the dangers of interactive media replacing genuine human connection and critical thinking has gained powerful new relevance in our digital age, transforming what some saw as a flawed adaptation into a remarkably foresighted cultural document. Fahrenheit 4:51's influence extends far beyond its initial reception, casting a long shadow over dystopian cinema that continues to this day. Its visual language can be traced through films like Terry Gilliam's Brazil, with its bureaucratic nightmare aesthetic, and Alfonso Cuarón's Children of Men, which similarly uses architecture and environment to reflect societal decline. Even more directly, the 2002 film Equilibrium borrowed heavily from Truffaut's vision, featuring grammaton clerics who destroy art and literature in pursuit of emotional control, a clear descendant of Montag's firemen. What makes Fahrenheit 451 particularly significant today is how accurately it predicted our complicated relationship with screens and information. The wall-sized televisions that demand Linda's constant interaction feel remarkably similar to our current social media landscape, where algorithms customize content to maintain engagement. The society's preference for simplified, context-free information over complex ideas mirrors our contemporary struggles with misinformation and decreasing attention spans. As Neil Postman would later argue in Amusing Ourselves to Death, Bradbury and Truffaut recognized that censorship might ultimately come not through book burning, but through the seduction of endless entertainment. The film's warning about the fragility of cultural memory resonates powerfully in our digital era. When Montag meets the book people who have memorized entire works to preserve them, they represent a human archive resistant to technological manipulation or deletion. This image gains new relevance as we increasingly store our collective knowledge in easily alterable digital formats rather than physical books. The film asks a question that feels more urgent than ever. What happens to society when access to its intellectual heritage depends on systems that can be controlled, manipulated, or simply shut off? HBO's 2018 adaptation of Fahrenheit 451 offers a fascinating contrast to Truffaut's vision. While the newer version updated the technological elements and visual style, many critics found it lacked the subtle power of the 1966 film. This reception suggests that Truffaut's restrained approach, focusing on human reactions to technology rather than the spectacle of technology itself, gives his adaptation a timelessness that more explicitly futuristic versions struggle to achieve. What ultimately makes Truffaut's Fahrenheit 451 endure is its profound humanism. Beyond its warnings about censorship and media control lies a deeply hopeful vision of literature's enduring power. The final scenes of people becoming the books they love represents one of cinema's most moving testaments to how stories shape our identity and connect us across time. In an age where reading faces competition from countless digital distractions, the image of these walking libraries reminds us why the written word matters. As screens continue to dominate our lives and algorithms increasingly determine what information we see, Fahrenheit 451 doesn't just remain relevant. It feels increasingly like a warning we failed to heed. Yet, in its final forest scene, with people quietly reciting the books they've preserved, it also offers hope that human connection to knowledge can survive even the most sophisticated attempts to sever it. What temperature, we might ask ourselves, do our own digital books burn at? So, what's your take? Is Truffaut's vision of a screen-dominated future still a cautionary tale? Or have we already accepted many elements of the world he warned us about? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this exploration of Fahrenheit 451, Subscribe for more deep dives into cinema's most thought-provoking classics.